Order. Question number 4, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Speaker, this question, and I'm pleased to see you too. This question to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements? If so, how?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, and with a sartorial elegance that I know the member privately admires.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to be churlish here.
Order. Order.
But point of order.
Order. Order.
Point of order.
Order. I needed to remind the House last Thursday points of order will be heard in silence. I look forward to the point of order. The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with respect, that is so frivolous. And also, as you can see, utterly wrong.
Order.
That he should be asked to apologise.
Order. No. The Prime Minister has no responsibility for the question that was put down by the Right Honourable Winston Peters. Further supplementary questions? Supplementary questions.
Prime Minister, when he said, and I quote him, let's take a minute to look at the enormity of this problem. The second worst housing affordability problem in the world. This problem has got worse in recent years. What did he do about it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, a considerable amount. That's what the comprehensive housing plan is about. It's ultimately about dealing with the issues that were created through the metropolitan urban limit in Auckland. It's the release of special housing lands, it's the reform of the RMA, it's first home buyers grants for New Zealanders, it's a much stronger economy to create the jobs, it's the release of land. There's just a range of things that the government has done to address that issue.
Good question.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
What initiatives did the Government of New Zealand take to increase housing supply?
Order. I have a point of order. I hope it is a genuine point of order.
That's a genuine point of order.
Then I will hear it.
It is usually, and I've observed it's usually the case, where the primary questioner gets the first two questions and then it passes to the side.
Order. Order. No, I don't need any assistance. The primary question was asked. The first supplementary went to the member, the Right Honourable Winston Peters. I then go across to this side. If there is a supplementary question, David Seymour.
Helps if the primary has some substance. What initiatives did the New Zealand government take between 2005 and 2008 to increase housing supply?
Order. No. Order. There is no Prime Ministerial responsibility in that question. Order. Order. Ron Mark, there is no need to behave like that. If the member wants to say, order, I'm excited by the potential question number 11. I want him to stay for that question, but I do need his assistance to behave himself in the meantime. Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Supplementary question. Prime Minister, when he said, and I quote him, we need government leadership that is prepared to focus on the fundamental issues, end of quotes, did he mean promoting the RMA changes loaded with race-based preference?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, and if the member's feeling guilty about the fact he was part of a government that did nothing when it came to housing, he should just get up and say sorry.
Ooh, he looks like he's hurting now. Supplementary question? Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Speaker, when the Prime Minister announces 4-point plan for improving home affordability, 1, ensuring people are in a better financial position to afford a house, 2, freeing up land supply, 3, dealing with compliance and building cost issues, and 4, allowing state house tenants to buy the houses they live in, what happened, Prime Minister, to the first 3 points?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a great deal has happened when it comes to improving the supply of housing in Auckland. That is why, and across New Zealand, that is why, in the year to August, nationwide residential building consents have increased 14% to 29,622, the highest total since March 2005. I remind the member that he was part of a government that saw nationwide house prices double, Mr. Speaker. Oh, the member doesn't like it when we point out what actually happened.
Order. 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 The member will resume his seat. If he wants to raise a point of order, he's certainly welcome to do. I certainly hope that this time it will be a genuine point of order.
It's a genuine point of order. It's to do with the fact that he went right off the question that he was being asked and started to get personal and nasty again, which is most unbecoming.
I don't need it. I don't know. I thank the Prime Minister for his help, but I don't need it. The question itself was a very long question. I could well have ruled it out on the basis that it wasn't succinct enough. I gave the member the benefit of the doubt and left the question there. It gave quite a wide ambit to the Prime Minister as he chose to answer it. Point of order, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I may stand corrected, and the member might want to make this clear, but I'm pretty sure he's quoting from statements I made back in 2008 when I wasn't Prime Minister, in which case, by definition, that does bring the points I'm making about the previous government well and truly into play, because that's what the question's about.
I thank the Prime Minister, but that again is actually a debating point rather than a point of order. Question number 5. Order. The